Hi, I wanted to welcome you to the Divorce Planning Podcast. I'm Carri Goldring, and I'm in the mortgage business, and I do planning pre-divorce for people who are either going to refinance their home, do an equity buyout, or plan to purchase a new home and make sure that everything in the divorce decree is worded properly and the numbers in the planning is taken care of so that you can go through the underwriting process smoothly. And I would like to introduce you to other people who are interested in the divorce planning process so you can get a real education of what's involved. Hope you enjoy. Today, I would like to welcome Dom Corstange, who is with Mutual Title, who's the title company that we use when we do our refinance transactions. And I'm so happy that you agreed to be here to help educate my audience. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, good. So we're going to talk about title and how people hold title, or the different ways that you can hold title and what they mean. And then if I have any questions or I end up interjecting, hopefully you won't mind that, but I'm going to kind of let you take it away if that's okay.
You interject as much as you want, Carrie. I won't mind in the least bit.
Okay, perfect. All right. So what can you teach us about holding title when you have ownership in a home?
So there's actually four different basic ways that you can hold title in Michigan. There is sole ownership, there is tenancy by entirety, joint tenants, and tenants in common. The most common way to hold title in Michigan is tenancy in common. Tenancy in common is actually you can have multiple owners on a title in a title on a piece of property, but you can also have varying ownership percentages. So somebody could own the property 51% of the property, and another person could own 49% of the property. The one thing with the tenancy in common in Michigan is that you can actually, if someone was to pass away, if you have two people who own the property and one of them was passed away, the ownership of the property actually goes to the heirs of the person that passed away rather than the other person that owns the property.
Okay, and I just want to clarify. So 3 people, 4 people, 5 people could own a home,
Yep.
and the percentages do not have to be equal.
Yep.
And if someone passes away, it goes to their heirs. So does that mean that the house is tied up in probate, or just their percentage of ownership is in probate? Do you know that answer?
The percentage of ownership is tied up in probate. So who becomes that partial owner? So if it's like a 25% share, if you have 44 different people owning the property, then that 25% share would end up in probate, depending on how the heirs want. I mean, it all depends on, what the attorneys say and, what the heirs want to do with the property at that point.
Well, someone shouldn't rush to sell a property. They should know that they need time for this to go through probate before they
Absolutely, because if you do rush to sell the property, there could be an outside ownership on the property, which means that there's an actual lien on the property that needs to be taken care of prior to selling the property. So when you go to sell the property, if you have that lien on the property and it hasn't been through probate and hasn't properly been documented, sometimes it can come back on you.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's wonderful. Thank you for
explaining
that.
So tenants by the entirety in Michigan. Now that's actually specifically was created for spouses. The reason being, one of the nice parts about having tenancy by the entirety in Michigan is if one of the spouses was to pass, the ownership of the property would go into the other spouse's name completely 100%. So you wouldn't have to go through any of the rigmarole that you would when you have a tenancy in common, that sort of thing. Now, the difference between the two, so what happens if there is a divorce situation, rather than the tenancy by entirety in Michigan, the property would automatically go to tenancy in common in Michigan. And now you and I were just discussing about how that can cause issues further down the line if you don't properly take care of that while going through the divorce or even prior to the divorce. Now, you even mentioned a situation where you had a couple of people where this had happened. They had gone through a divorce, and one of the spouses went to do a refinance, and there was a $20,000 judgment from the other spouse that never got taken care of. So it's really important to understand that your ownership changes once you go into that divorce situation. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to talk to your attorney about how to properly handle that. You have to talk to your loan officer about how to properly go about making sure that you aren't going to get another judgment lien on your property that you weren't expecting, because nobody likes to spend any more money than they have to on at that.
Right.
So
Right. And a lot of people forget that part. So I was telling you, I had a couple who were married going through a divorce, and the woman was going to be awarded the home and she needed to refinance to get her husband off the current mortgage. And his attorney made a very big stink saying, I do not want anyone refinancing or doing anything until the judgment is signed by the judge. Okay, the other attorney's like, well, that makes sense. Want to make sure no one changes their mind, blah, blah, go ahead with it. Well, what happened was they got divorced. Now automatic tenancy in common. So now it's not protected by single creditors. So he had this 20,000 judgment against him, which was never attached to the house while it was held in entireties while they were married. But the second they got divorced, that judgment automatically got attached to the house. So then when I went to go refinance her and we did the title search on the home, this judgment came up, and all the divorce decree said was she has to refinance and pay him his equity. It didn't say anything about this judgment, and she got stuck paying the judgment.
yeah,
So it
that
was
is not what you want to deal with.
that
So
is
be very
not what we
careful that,
wanted. So he had a pretty maybe sneaky attorney. I don't know.
right? Through one past you,
Right.
sometimes they do that,
Mm-hmm.
So there are two other types of home ownership that you can take title in. There is sole ownership in Michigan, so that would be where there's an individual that owns the property. However, there is a caveat to that. When a sole owner, if they are married and they're trying to do a sole owner, if it's not a purchase money mortgage, then the spouse would have to sign the mortgage, which would mean they would have to sign the deed if you were ever to sell the property. Purchase money mortgage is either at the purchase price or below the purchase price.
So you
Uh,
wouldn't have to have your spouse sign when you're buying, but you need to
right.
have your spouse sign if you're selling.
Yeah. If it's not a purchase money mortgage. Yep.
Okay, so if
Yep.
you own it for cash, does the spouse need to sign when you sell?
Spouse doesn't need to sign at that point. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, I don't get involved in those. That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yep. No, that's the nice part about cash. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, cash is king, right?
Cash is king. That's right.
Always. So you had mentioned entireties. I just want to clarify one thing. So if I'm married and you're married, but not to each other, and we buy a house together, we don't get to do that entireties.
Right.
It's only if we're married to each other.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the tenant by entirety. Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to
You also, in that case, you could do a joint tenants, which would mean that all parties have an equal right to the property, and they would assume the owner's interest if one member was to pass away as well. So that's the way that you would title that type of a transaction. It's just
Okay.
joint tenants.
And then you have to have equal ownership,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. You got it.
So what I always find really interesting is when people purchase a home, most of the time they don't even see the deed.
Well, I think a lot of times people, yeah, and I agree with you. And most times people don't look at the way it's actually titled. There are different options, and sometimes those options are going to be better. One option might be better than the go-to, which is the tenancy in common. So it is important to take a look at that and actually understand how you're taking ownership of that property. So down the road, you might not have as many issues.
All right, let's talk about one more, and then I think we're
Okay.
good to wrap it up. I'm purchasing a home as a single, unmarried woman by myself. I own
Yep.
this home. Now I get married.
Right.
Does anything happen to my
Nothing
title?
necessarily needs to happen. I mean, you could put your spouse onto the deed at that point. Used to be we no longer have dower rights in Michigan, it is either good or bad any way that you look at it. So it's not as if they need to sign off on the property down the road. If you claim it as primary residence, you do have to sign, if there is any kind of lien that gets placed on the property, you would have to be aware of that. But other than that, there's nothing else that you would need to do.
Okay, so if I own it by myself and I'm married, but I don't hold tight, it doesn't automatically go to entireties, right? If I want that creditor protection, I have to do a new deed.
Right. Yep.
Okay. All right, just wanted to clarify that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else that you can think of that we should add to our different types of title? Or did we
I can't think of anything else. Yeah, those are the four basic ones. And I think, yeah, we went through everything that could happen on your title with those four basic ones. So,
Perfect.
I think we did good.
Okay, I
Yep.
thank you. I
Thank
really,
you,
really
Carri.
appreciate you being here. And if anyone wants to get a hold of Mutual Title on their own, is there a way that they could do that?
Sure. You can actually give me a call if you want. It's area code 616-648-4534. And I answer to calls or texts. You can also email me. This is a long one. I apologize. My last name is a little bit longer than most, but it's dcorstange. That's DCORSTANGE at mutualtitleagency.com. Otherwise, you can email service@mutualtitleagency.com and just ask for Dominic, and I'll see it in that service email as well.
Sounds good. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Carri. It's been fun.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm Carri Goldring, and if you ever have any questions regarding mortgage, feel free to give me a call or send me a text message, 248-420-4524. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.